If you ever want a masterclass on how to obliterate your entire academic future social standing and fundamental right to a peaceful existence in under 30 seconds, just take a seat. I am an expert. My name is Noah Foster, and up until last Friday, I was Ridgeview High's invisible scholarship kid. I kept my head down, aced my AP calculus exams, and avoided the elite ruling class of our school like the plague. Especially him, Caleb Sterling. Caleb is the kind of guy who doesn't just walk down the hallway, he parts it. Quarterback, heir to the Sterling Empire, a guy whose trust fund probably has its own trust fund. He has this infuriatingly perfect jawline hair that always looks like it was styled by the wind itself, and a smirk that makes me want to throw a textbook at his head. Teachers adore him, donors worship his father, and somehow, just by existing in the same airspace, he makes me feel like I am standing on a trapdoor waiting to drop. I hate him. I really truly, from the bottom of my overworked, underslept soul, hate him. And because keeping that hatred bottled up inside was giving me a literal ulcer, I did what any rational, sleep-deprived teenager would do. I created an anonymous fan page, the Anti-Golden Boy Coalition. For 3 years, I was the masked vigilante of Ridgeview's digital underworld. I posted memes about his ridiculous varsity jackets. I critiqued his terrifyingly aggressive football tackles. I was the voice of the people, or at least the voice of the bitter scholarship-dependent people. It was therapeutic. It was safe. It was completely anonymous. Until the AP Physics afterparty. Look, I am not a drinker, but after 3 grueling hours of calculating quantum mechanics, my best friend Tyler handed me a red Solo cup filled with something that tasted like battery acid and bad decisions, and I chugged it. Big mistake. By 11 p.m., I was safely locked in my tiny claustrophobic dorm room, heavily buzzed and feeling a sudden burning need to speak my truth to my dedicated followers. I set up my phone on its cheap plastic stand, turned on the heavy voice-altering, face-blurring filter I always used, and hit go live. The viewer count spiked almost immediately. 200, 500, 1,000. Ridgeview students lived for drama, and I was their favorite midnight show. Welcome back, my fellow peasants. I slurred slightly, leaning back in my squeaky desk chair. Let us talk about our beloved golden boy, Caleb Sterling. Did anyone else see him walking into the cafeteria today? The guy walks like he personally owns the floor tiles. Newsflash: Sterling wearing a limited edition varsity jacket indoors doesn't make you look cool. It makes you look like a walking sweat lodge. The comments were flying. Laughing emojis, fire emojis. People were eating it up. And do not even get me started on that fake media-trained smile. I continued gesturing wildly, my words flowing with reckless abandon. I swear if you look closely into his eyes, there is nothing there. Just elevator music and the sound of his dad's credit card swiping. I was on a roll. I was a comedian. I was a revolutionary. And then my elbow hit the edge of the desk. My phone wobbled. I lunged to catch it, my fingers scrambling clumsily against the smooth screen. I didn't catch the phone, but I did catch the screen perfectly enough to swipe away the filter app. The phone hit the floor screen up. I froze. I stared down at the device. The screen was glaringly bright. The voice-altering icon was gone. The face-blurring pixelation was gone. And staring back at me from the floor, perfectly framed by the harsh fluorescent light of my dorm room, was my very own unfiltered panic-stricken face. And right below my chin, the little location tag blinked happily, Noah Foster's room, Ridgeview dorms. The chat stopped. For 3 agonizing seconds, there wasn't a single comment. Not one. It was the kind of digital silence where you could physically feel hundreds of teenagers collectively stopping their breath. Then the explosion happened. The comments flew by. Wait, Noah Foster, the scholarship kid. Oh my god, he is dead. Caleb is watching this live, bro. My heart didn't just drop, it plummeted into the earth's core. I scrambled to the floor, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hit the end live button. When the screen finally went black, the physical silence in my room was deafening. I sat on the cheap carpet, gasping for air. I didn't plan this. I didn't think. I just ruined my life. The Sterling family practically funded the school's science wing. If Caleb wanted my scholarship revoked, he could do it with a single text message. I needed to pack. I needed to flee to Canada. I was halfway to grabbing my duffel bag when a slow, deliberate, heavy knocking sound echoed through the quiet hallway. Every muscle in my body locked. It couldn't be him. It was Tyler, just Tyler, coming to tell me I was a colossal idiot. I crept toward the door, my breathing shallow, my chest tight. I reached for the handle, my palms slick with cold sweat, and pulled it open just a crack. It wasn't Tyler. Caleb Sterling stood in the dimly lit hallway. He was wearing the exact varsity jacket I had just insulted. His dark hair was slightly messy, casting shadows over his eyes. He didn't look angry. He didn't look furious. He looked deadly. Before I could slam the door shut, his hand shot out, pushing against the wood with a force that sent me stumbling backward. Caleb stepped into my tiny, cramped room, the sheer size of him making the walls feel like they were closing in. He kicked the door shut behind him. The loud click of the lock echoed like a gunshot. He backed me up until my shoulders hit the cold wood of my closet door. He didn't say a word. He just leaned in, trapping me between his arms, his scent of expensive cedar and pure adrenaline invading my space. He looked down at me, his eyes dark, intense, and completely unreadable. So Caleb finally whispered, his voice dangerously low, sending a shiver straight down my spine. "You think I have nothing behind my eyes, Foster?" I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I was absolutely unequivocally screwed. "You think I have nothing behind my eyes, Foster?" The question hung in the air, heavy and lethal. I pressed myself harder against the closet door, wishing I possessed the supernatural ability to phase through solid wood. Caleb Sterling was inches away. Up close, the sheer physical reality of him was overwhelming. I could see the faint pulse beating at the base of his throat. I could see the slight irregularity in his breathing. I tried to speak. My voice cracked, betraying me instantly. It was a metaphor. Caleb didn't blink. He just stared at me with that dark, unreadable intensity. For 5 agonizing seconds, I waited for the punch. I waited for him to pull out his phone and ruin my life. Instead, he exhaled a short, sharp breath that almost sounded like a laugh. He stepped back, instantly releasing the terrifying tension in the room. He walked over to my desperately uncool twin-sized dorm bed, sat down on the edge, and picked up a stray green grape from a plastic bowl on my nightstand. He tossed it in the air, caught it in his mouth, and chewed slowly, his eyes scanning my cramped living space. "You have a terrible setup," he stated plainly, pointing a finger at my cheap ring light. "The lighting makes you look like a hostage." I blinked, my brain violently misfiring. "I am sorry, are you critiquing my cinematography right now? You just caught me running a hate page dedicated to your entire existence." Caleb leaned back, resting his weight on his elbows. He looked entirely too comfortable on my cheap mattress. "I know. I watched the whole thing. It was very passionate. Wrong, but passionate." He tilted his head. "I could go to the principal right now. I could show him the screen recording. You would lose your scholarship by tomorrow morning. You would be packing your bags for whatever public school you came from." My stomach plummeted. There it was, the executioner's axe. "Please," I whispered, the fight completely draining out of me. "Caleb, please. I will delete the page. I will apologize publicly. I will scrub the stadium bleachers with a toothbrush. Just do not take my scholarship." Caleb watched me, his expression softening just a fraction, though his jaw remained tight. "I do not want you to delete the page, Noah." Hearing my first name in his voice felt entirely foreign. You do not?" "No." He sat up, grabbing another grape. "You have a dedicated audience. 3,000 followers is good engagement. It would be a waste to shut it down." A slow, dangerous smirk spread across his face, the exact smirk I had spent 3 years analyzing and despising. "Here is the deal, Foster. You keep the page. But starting tomorrow, the content changes." I swallowed hard. "To what?" "To me," he said, entirely deadpan. "Every night at 8 p.m. sharp, you will go live for exactly 30 minutes. And for those 30 minutes, you are going to talk about how incredible I am. You are going to praise my athletic abilities. You are going to compliment my bone structure. You are going to become the president of the Caleb Sterling fan club." I stared at him, utterly horrified. "You want me to simp for you? On live internet? To the people who tune in specifically to hate you?" "Yes." Caleb stood up, towering over me once again. He walked to the door, resting his hand on the handle. "It is either that, or I make a phone call to the admissions office. See you tomorrow at 8, Foster. Make sure your ring light is charged." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me alone with a bowl of grapes and a shattered reality. The first broadcast was, without exaggeration, the most humiliating 30 minutes of my entire 17 years on Earth. At exactly 7:55 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Caleb let himself in, carrying a ridiculously expensive leather backpack. He didn't say a word. He just walked over to my bed, sat just outside the camera's frame, pulled out a thick textbook, and nodded at me to start. I hit the go live button. The chat exploded instantly. People were demanding answers. They wanted to know if I was dead, if I was in hiding, if the Sterlings had sued my family into oblivion. I took a deep, shaky breath, glancing nervously to my right. Caleb wasn't even looking at me. He was highlighting a paragraph in his AP Gov book. "Welcome back, everyone." I forced out my voice, sounding like it belonged to a dying Victorian child. So, about yesterday, I had a revelation. A spiritual awakening, if you will. I have realized that I was wrong. Completely wrong. Caleb Sterling is not a tyrant. The chat paused, with people asking, "Wait, what?" In fact, I continued feeling a piece of my soul permanently detach and float away. Caleb Sterling is a visionary. Did you see him at practice today? The way he threw that football, it defied gravity. It was majestic. He is the golden standard of human evolution. A soft object hit the side of my head. I flinched. A green grape bounced onto my desk. I glared to my right. Caleb didn't look up from his book, but his hand was casually hovering over my snack bowl. More enthusiasm, he mouthed silently. His hair. I practically yelled at the camera, my face burning scarlet. His hair is always perfectly swept, like he has a personal wind machine following him at all times. He is beautiful. The chat was having a meltdown. Half of them thought I was being held at gunpoint. The other half thought it was the most brilliant high-tier satirical comedy I had ever produced. But it wasn't comedy. It was my life now. This bizarre hostage situation became our daily routine. Every night, Caleb would show up, sit on my bed out of frame, and do his homework while I delivered my agonizing monologues. If I stuttered, he threw a grape. If I insulted him under my breath, he threw a pen. But as the days turned into a week, the sheer terror began to fade into something else, something confusing. Because sitting just 3 feet away from my worst enemy, I started to actually see him. I noticed things. I noticed that his phone screen lit up every 5 minutes relentlessly. Messages from his dad, his private trainers, his college counselors. "Don't forget the charity gala. Your sprint time is down 0.2 seconds. Fix it. Be perfect." I noticed that he never actually responded to them. He just stared at the screen, his jaw tightening before flipping the phone face down. I noticed that he barely ate surviving on black coffee and whatever snacks he stole from my desk. The turning point happened on a Tuesday. It was pouring rain outside, the kind of heavy California downpour that makes everything feel isolated. I had finished my excruciating broadcast and turned off the camera. Usually this was the cue for Caleb to pack his expensive bag and leave without a word, but tonight he didn't move. I turned around in my squeaky chair. Caleb was sitting at my small desk. He had moved there to use the outlet for his laptop, but he wasn't typing. His head rested on his crossed arms over his textbook. His chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. He was fast asleep. I froze. I should have woken him up. I should have kicked him out, but the room was quiet save for the rain lashing against the window glass. I stood up slowly and walked over. Without the smirk, without the perfect posture, without the crushing weight of the Sterling name shielding him, he looked completely different. The harsh dorm lighting cast shadows under his eyes, deep, bruised-looking circles of exhaustion that he usually hid so well. The tension in his shoulders was completely gone. He didn't look like a king. He didn't look like a bully. He looked like a 17-year-old kid who was drowning under 1,000,000 pounds of pressure, desperately trying not to let anyone see him sink. I stood there for a long time listening to him breathe. My phone was in my pocket. I could have taken a picture. I could have posted it to the world, proving that the golden boy was human and exhausted, just like the rest of us. Instead, I reached over to my desk lamp, the one shining right in his eyes, and gently clicked it off. They say it takes exactly 21 days to form a habit. I always thought that was a psychological myth, right up until Caleb Sterling became a permanent fixture in my suffocatingly small dorm room. 3 weeks into our bizarre arrangement, the 8 p.m. live streams had shifted from sheer unadulterated terror to something far more dangerous. A routine. Caleb no longer knocked. He just walked in, dropped his ridiculously expensive leather bag by the door, and took his designated spot on my bed. And somewhere along the line, the dynamic had shifted. He stopped throwing grapes at me. Instead, he started bringing things. It started on a Tuesday. I was practically falling asleep at my desk, dreading the impending 30 minutes of mandatory praising. Caleb walked in, didn't say a word, and slid a plastic cup across my desk. Iced Americano, 2 pumps of vanilla, a splash of oat milk. I stared at the condensation dripping down the plastic, completely paralyzed. How did you know my exact order? I asked, my voice laced with genuine suspicion. Are you having me investigated by private detectives? Caleb didn't even look up from his AP calculus textbook. You mumbled about it in your sleep last week when you dozed off studying. Drink it, Foster. Your dark circles are ruining the aesthetic of my fan club. I wanted to throw the coffee away out of pure spite, but I was exhausted and it was perfectly cold. I took a sip. It was the best thing I had ever tasted, and that was terrifying. Things were getting weird, and my roommate Tyler was absolutely zero help. The first time Caleb showed up, Tyler practically leaped out of the window to escape. But lately, Tyler had developed a highly suspicious habit of remembering urgent errands right at 7:55 p.m. "Oh man, I totally forgot I have to do my laundry," Tyler announced on a Thursday, grabbing an entirely empty laundry basket. "Tyler, you did laundry yesterday," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "Do not leave me alone with him." Tyler just patted my hand with a sickeningly knowing smile. "Good luck with your hostage situation, buddy." And he was out the door. So it was just me and Caleb. Night after night, the quiet hum of my laptop fan, the scratch of his pen against paper. I found myself deliberately extending my monologues, running them to 35, sometimes 40 minutes, just to see if he would complain. He never did. But if the real world was settling into a strange, uneasy peace, the digital world was a war zone. My followers were practically rioting. The people who used to tune in to watch me roast the Golden Boy were furious about my sudden change of heart. The comments were brutal: "Sellout," "Traitor," "Blink twice if you are being held hostage." But amidst the sea of hate, there was one beacon of unhinged loyalty. User 892. User 892 had been following the page since its inception. But ever since the praise stream started, this anonymous account had leveled up from a casual lurker to an absolute warlord. If someone commented, "This admin is a pathetic loser," user 892 would immediately reply, "You wouldn't know a brilliant mind if it hit you in the face. Shut up and listen to him." And it wasn't just words. User 892 started tipping. $10 here, $50 there. Sometimes attached to messages like, "Buy yourself a better desk chair, your posture is terrible." I felt a profound, entirely embarrassing attachment to user 892. In a world where my father figure was a high school counselor and my mortal enemy was sitting 3 feet away from me, this anonymous stranger was the only person fiercely protecting my corner. I just had no idea how literal that protection was. The illusion shattered on a Friday afternoon. It was a free period. I was hiding in the furthest, dustiest corner of the Ridgeview High Library working on a history paper. Caleb, because he apparently no longer knew the meaning of personal space, was sitting at the exact same table, typing an essay on his phone. We hadn't spoken a word in 20 minutes. It was almost peaceful. Then Caleb's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his jaw instantly locked. It was the same expression he wore whenever his father texted him. Without a word, he shoved his chair back, left his phone sitting face up on the desk, and walked out into the corridor to take the call. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone, deciding to take a 5-minute break. I opened the fan page app. A notification popped up immediately. User 892 has just tipped $100. Message attached: "Ignore the haters in the comments today. You are doing fine." A small, genuine smile tugged at my lips. I loved user 892. I was practically ready to propose to user 892. But out of the corner of my eye, a sudden flash of light caught my attention. Caleb's abandoned phone on the table. The screen had lit up. I didn't mean to look. I swear to God, I am not a snooper, but the text was large and the phone was less than 2 feet away. My eyes dragged across the glowing glass. Apple Pay receipt $100 sent to the Anti-Golden Boy Coalition. Account logged in user 892. The library seemed to lose all its oxygen. My breath caught in my throat. The sounds of students whispering and pages turning faded into a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I looked at my phone. I looked at Caleb's phone. User 892. The guy who defended me. The guy who told trolls to shut up. The guy who noticed my terrible posture and told me I was doing fine. It was him. It was the guy who shoved me against doors. The guy who had everything. The guy who I had spent 3 years tearing down on the internet. My hands started to shake. The reality of the situation crashed into me like a freight train, tearing apart every single assumption I had ever made about Caleb Sterling. He wasn't just tolerating my page, he was funding it. He was guarding it. He was guarding me. Heavy footsteps approached the table. Caleb rounded the bookshelf, slipping his phone into his pocket with a heavy sigh, running a hand through his perfectly messy hair. He looked exhausted. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine. What Caleb asked, his brow furrowing slightly at the look of absolute unadulterated shock on my face. "Foster, what is wrong with you? You look like you have seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just stared at the boy who was supposed to be my enemy, realizing for the very first time that I had no idea who he actually was. The principal's office at Ridgeview High always smelled strongly of lemon pledge and crushed dreams. But on Monday morning, it smelled like something entirely different. Expensive cologne and absolute terrifying power. I sat in the uncomfortable wooden chair, my hands gripped so tightly together that my knuckles were stark white. Across the mahogany desk sat Principal Harris, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floorboards, and standing by the window, casting a literal and metaphorical shadow over the entire room, was Richard Sterling, Caleb's father. He didn't look like a parent making a routine school visit. He looked like a CEO evaluating a hostile takeover. He turned away from the window, tossing a thick, incredibly heavy-looking manila folder onto the desk. "Do you know what this is, Mr. Foster?" His voice was cold, perfectly modulated, and completely devoid of any human warmth. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. "These are IP logs," Richard Sterling said smoothly. "Bank statements, transcripts of online video broadcasts. It seems my son has been funneling thousands of dollars from his private trust into a digital hate campaign. A campaign run by you." The floor dropped out from under me. I didn't ask him for money. I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't even know it was him until 3 days ago. It doesn't matter what you knew, Sterling cut in, stepping closer. The sheer presence of the man was suffocating. What matters is that you are a distraction, a parasite. Caleb is the quarterback of a state championship team. He is an early admit to an Ivy League university. He is a Sterling. And you are a charity case who slipped through the cracks of our admissions policy. The words hit me like physical blows. They hit exactly where I was weakest. "Here are your options." Sterling continued tapping the folder. "You delete the page. You withdraw from Ridgeview by the end of the week. You disappear quietly. If you do, I will not press cyberbullying and extortion charges. If you refuse, I will publicly ruin you, and I will pull my family's funding from this school." I imagine Principal Harris would have to cut the entire scholarship program to compensate. He was looking at me like I was a smudge of dirt on his expensive shoes. And the worst part, the absolute most agonizing part, I believed him. My imposter syndrome, the dark, suffocating voice in my head that I fought every single day, roared to life. "He is right," the voice whispered. "You don't belong here. You never did. You are just a joke to them." I stood up, my legs trembling so badly I thought I might collapse. "I will delete it," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I will stay away from him." I didn't wait to be dismissed. I turned and ran. I found Caleb exactly where I knew he would be before afternoon practice, sitting alone on the top tier of the stadium bleachers, staring out at the empty turf. When he heard my footsteps clanking against the metal, he turned. His face lit up. It was a small, subtle shift, but his dark eyes softened and the tension in his jaw relaxed. That look almost broke me in half. "Foster," Caleb said, shifting to make room for me. "I was wondering if you were going to show up." "You are sick," I blurted out. The words sliced through the cool autumn air. Caleb froze, his half-formed smile dying instantly. "What?" I stopped 3 feet away from him, wrapping my arms around myself as if the physical barrier could protect me from what I was about to do. I had to make him hate me. It was the only way to save my scholarship, and more importantly, to save him from himself. "I know about user 892, I said, my voice shaking with forced anger. "I saw your phone in the library. What is wrong with you, Caleb? Why would you pay me to humiliate you?" Caleb stood up, panic suddenly flashing across his perfectly composed features. "Noah, listen. Let me explain. It is not what you think. The page, it was the only place where I didn't have to be perfect. It was the only place where someone looked at me and saw a real flawed person. That is a psychological complex, Caleb," I yelled, stepping back as he stepped forward. "It is a sickness. You don't actually care about me. You just have this twisted Stockholm syndrome. You are so suffocated by your dad and your perfect little life that you latched on to the one person who treated you like garbage. That is not true." Caleb's voice cracked. He reached out his fingers, desperately grazing the sleeve of my hoodie. "Noah, please. You are the only real thing in my life. I am a scholarship kid who hates you." I screamed, tears finally spilling over my eyelashes, hot and humiliating. "Look at us. We aren't a love story. We are a glitch. You used me to rebel against your dad, and I let you because I am pathetic. Just stay away from me." I ripped my arm out of his grasp. The look of absolute shattered devastation on Caleb's face is something that will haunt my nightmares until the day I die. But I forced myself to turn around. I forced myself to walk down the bleachers, leaving him standing there in the wind. I thought that was the end. I thought I had fixed it. I was wrong. An hour later, I was walking across the parking lot, dragging my feet toward the bus stop when the screaming started. I turned toward the football field. The entire varsity team had stopped practicing. The coaches were standing in stunned silence, because standing right in the middle of the 50-yard line, surrounded by everyone, was Caleb, and standing directly across from him was Richard Sterling. I couldn't hear the exact words over the wind, but I could hear the tone. Richard was yelling, pointing a commanding finger at his son. But Caleb wasn't backing down. For the first time in his life, the golden boy was fighting back. Suddenly, Caleb reached up. He ripped off his varsity helmet, the symbol of his entire manufactured identity, and threw it violently onto the turf. A sickening crack sounded. Then he unbuckled his shoulder pads, letting them drop to the grass. Richard Sterling's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He pulled out a set of car keys and a leather wallet, holding them up as a clear, undeniable threat. His face clearly said, "Walk away, and you lose everything." Caleb didn't even hesitate. He turned his back on his father, on his team, on his entire billion-dollar future, and walked off the field. He had nothing left. He had no car, no money, no home. And as I stood frozen in the parking lot, watching the rain begin to fall from the darkening California sky, a terrifying realization slammed into my chest. I was the only thing he had left to lose. California rain is usually a myth, a mild drizzle that barely wets the pavement. But tonight, the sky broke open, mirroring the absolute catastrophic wreck of my life. I was pacing a literal hole into my cheap dorm room carpet. My brain was playing the same horrifying highlight reel on a relentless loop. Caleb throwing his helmet. Caleb walking away from his father. Caleb giving up a billion-dollar legacy, all while I ran away like a coward. I had told him we were a glitch. I had called his feelings a sickness. And in return, he had completely dismantled his own life. Thunder rattled the thin window panes, and right on cue, a knock echoed against my door. It wasn't a heavy, demanding knock. It was weak, hesitant. I stopped pacing. My heart leaped into my throat as I reached for the handle and pulled the door open. Caleb Sterling stood in the hallway, dripping wet. The perfectly styled hair was plastered to his forehead. His clothes were soaked through, clinging to his shivering frame. He didn't have his phone. He didn't have a jacket. He had nothing but the clothes on his back and a look of absolute soul-crushing defeat in his eyes. Caleb started his teeth, chattering so hard the word broke in half. I didn't know where else to go. Before I could even process the sheer gravity of him standing there, a blur of motion shot past me. Tyler, my aggressively perceptive roommate, leaped off his top bunk, grabbing his pillow and a blanket in one smooth practice motion. Wow, look at the time I completely forgot. I promised Chad I would help him study for things, Tyler announced loudly, not making eye contact with either of us. He practically shoved Caleb inside the room, stepped out into the hallway, and gave me a wildly enthusiastic thumbs up. I will be back tomorrow or next week. Do not open this door for anyone. The lock clicked from the outside. Tyler had literally trapped us in. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the sound of rainwater dripping from Caleb's clothes onto the linoleum floor. He just stood there, arms wrapped around himself, looking so incredibly small. The golden boy completely stripped of his gold. My panic-induced paralysis finally broke. "You are freezing," I blurted out, springing into action. I dragged my desk chair over. "Sit down. Now." For once in his life, Caleb didn't argue. He practically collapsed into the chair. I tore through my closet, pulling out my thickest pair of sweatpants and my favorite oversized Ridgeview hoodie. I grabbed a towel and threw it over his wet hair. "Change into these," I ordered, turning my back to give him privacy. I could hear the rustle of wet clothes hitting the floor. "Noah," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Do not talk," I snapped, though there was no real venom in it. My hands were shaking. "Just put the dry clothes on." When I turned back around, he was swallowed up in my oversized gray hoodie, but something was horribly wrong. He was still shivering violently, and a flushed, unnatural red color had crept up his neck and cheeks. I stepped closer, pressing the back of my hand against his forehead. I yanked my hand back instantly. "Caleb, you are burning up." "I'm fine," he mumbled, his eyes sliding half shut. He swayed dangerously in the chair. "You are not fine, you idiot. You are running a massive fever." I hooked my arm under his shoulder, hauling him up. He was incredibly heavy, completely dead weight, but adrenaline fueled me as I dragged him the 3 steps toward my bed. He slumped onto the mattress. I pulled the heavy comforter up to his chin, tucking it tightly around his shaking shoulders. I rushed to the mini fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and dampened a washcloth, pressing it gently to his burning forehead. I sat on the edge of the mattress watching him. The silence was heavy, loaded with all the horrific things I had screamed at him on the bleachers. The voice in my head, the imposter syndrome that told me I was a fraud, a parasite, a charity case, was screaming at me to run away. "He does not belong here," it whispered. "You ruined his life." "I didn't mean to," Caleb mumbled, his voice thick and slurred from the fever. I leaned in closer. "Shh, go to sleep, Caleb." "No, listen," he forced out, his eyes squeezed shut, tossing his head weakly against the pillow. His walls, usually so impeccably fortified by years of sterling family training, were completely destroyed by the delirium. "I didn't just find your page. I knew it was you." I froze the damp washcloth stalling in my hand. "What?" "Freshman year," he breathed out, his chest rising and falling unsteadily. "Science fair. You were standing by your project. I walked by with my dad. I looked at you. You were so bright, Noah. So smart. I wanted to talk to you." My heart stopped beating. Freshman year, the day he had laughed at my presentation, the day I started the anti-fan page. I tried to smile. Caleb whispered, a tear slipping out of the corner of his fever-bright eye, soaking into my pillowcase. But my dad nudged me, told me not to associate with the charity cases. So I panicked. I laughed. I ruined it. I ruined it before it even started. The air left my lungs. I couldn't fix it. He continued, his voice breaking into a quiet sob that shattered every defense I had left. "You hated me, so I let you. Because the hate page, user 892, it was the only way I could be close to you without my dad tearing you down. It was the only way I could protect you." He reached out blindly from under the blanket. His hot, trembling fingers brushed against my knee. "I do not have a complex, Noah," he sobbed quietly, completely broken. "I just wanted you." I stared at the boy in my bed, the quarterback, the air, the enemy, and suddenly the loud, suffocating voice of my imposter syndrome just died. It went completely silent, because looking at Caleb right now, I realized I wasn't an imposter. I wasn't a glitch in his perfect system. I was his lifeline, and he was mine. A hot tear tracked down my own cheek, dropping onto the blanket. I didn't wipe it away. Instead, I reached out. I took his burning, trembling hand in both of mine, lacing our fingers together with a grip so tight it promised I would never let go again. "I am here," I whispered, my voice breaking. I leaned down, resting my forehead gently against his hot shoulder. "I am right here, Caleb, and I am not going anywhere." He let out a long, shuddering exhale, his fingers weakly squeezing mine back before the fever finally pulled him under into a deep, exhausted sleep. For the first time in my life, locked in a tiny dorm room with my former worst enemy, I finally felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The microphone felt heavy in my hand, cold, unforgiving. I stood behind the wooden podium in the center of the Ridgeview High Gymnasium, staring out at a sea of judges, board members, and elite parents. This was the National Science Expo Regional Qualifiers. For the last 3 years, this exact room was where my imposter syndrome would usually swallow me whole. I would stutter, I would sweat, and I would apologize for existing. Not today. My eyes scanned the back row of the bleachers and stopped. Caleb was sitting there. He was wearing the same oversized gray hoodie I had given him 2 nights ago. He had no trust fund, no credit cards, and technically, no permanent address. Yet, leaning back with his arms crossed over his chest, he looked more like a king than he ever had in his varsity jacket. He gave me a single barely perceptible nod. I took a deep breath, leaned into the microphone, and started to speak. I didn't just present my project, I weaponized it. I spoke with a clarity and a fire I didn't know I possessed. When the judges threw complicated trapdoor questions at me, questions specifically designed to trip up high schoolers, I didn't flinch. I dismantled their arguments with terrifying precision. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the scholarship kid begging for a seat at the table. I owned the room. And when the final applause broke out loud and undeniable, I didn't look at the judges. I looked straight at Caleb. He was smiling, a real, unfiltered, devastatingly proud smile. But the euphoria lasted exactly 10 minutes. As the gymnasium began to empty and I started packing up my display board, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet by 10 degrees. The chatter died down. I turned around. Richard Sterling was walking across the polished gymnasium floor. He wasn't alone. 2 men in sharp suits flanked him, looking like corporate executioners. He didn't even glance at my science project. His cold, calculating eyes were locked entirely on his son, who had just walked down from the bleachers to stand beside my table. Caleb Richards' voice echoed in the cavernous room, sharp as glass. "This pathetic little rebellion of yours ends today. You have missed 3 private training sessions. You have abandoned your team. The car is waiting outside. You are coming home, and we are going to fix this." Caleb's jaw clenched. The old Caleb, the one who lived in terror of not being perfect, would have lowered his head and followed orders. But the boy standing next to me didn't move an inch. Before Caleb could even open his mouth, my body moved on its own. I stepped out from behind the table. I stepped directly into the space between the billionaire and his son, physically shielding Caleb with my own body. Richard Sterling stopped looking down at me as if I were a cockroach that had just learned how to speak. "Move aside, Mr. Foster. You have already done enough damage." "No," I said. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. "No," Caleb murmured behind me, a warning and a plea mixed into one. I said no. I repeated, staring dead into Richard Sterling's eyes. "He is not a machine, Mr. Sterling. He is a 17-year-old kid. He is not your trophy. He is not your PR campaign, and he is certainly not your property. You do not get to drag him away just because he stopped following your psychotic script." Richard's eyes narrowed into terrifying slits. "You are playing a very dangerous game, boy. You have no money, no power, and absolutely no idea who you are dealing with." "You are right," I shot back, lifting my chin. "I do not have money, I do not have power, which means you have absolutely nothing left to threaten me with. You cannot take away my scholarship because my project just secured state funding. You cannot ruin my reputation because I do not care what your country club friends think. I am a nobody. And that makes me untouchable." The silence in the gymnasium was absolute. No one had ever spoken to Richard Sterling like that in his entire life. Richard sneered, looking past me. "Caleb, are you really going to throw away your entire inheritance for a nobody who lives in a glorified closet?" Caleb stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. Our arms brushed, and the heat of his skin sent a jolt of pure electricity straight to my heart. "Yes," Caleb said. His voice was calm, incredibly steady, and completely final. "I do not want the trust fund. I do not want the legacy. Keep it all." He reached down, intertwining his fingers with mine right in front of his father. "I am staying with him." Richard Sterling stared at our locked hands for a long, suffocating moment. His jaw worked furiously, but for all his billions, he couldn't force a teenage boy to walk through a set of double doors. Without another word, he turned on his heel and marched out of the gymnasium, his suits trailing behind him. We had won. 20 minutes later, the adrenaline crash hit me like a truck. We were standing in the empty school parking lot. The yellow streetlights flickered above us, casting long shadows on the damp asphalt. The night air was freezing, but my hand was still warm from where Caleb had held it. We were standing facing each other, the distance between us barely 2 feet, but it felt like a canyon of unsaid words. "Noah," Caleb said softly, breaking the quiet. I looked up. His dark eyes were studying my face with an intensity that made my breath hitch. "You stood up to him," Caleb whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "You stood up to my dad. For me." "I am an admin of a hate page," I replied, trying to force a sarcastic smirk to hide the fact that my heart was beating at 1,000,000 miles an hour. "I am professionally trained in dealing with toxic behavior." Caleb stepped closer. The smirk melted off my face. My back hit the cold metal of my beat-up Honda Civic. Caleb placed one hand on the roof of the car, effectively boxing me in his chest mere inches from mine. "You insulted me for 3 years on the internet," Caleb murmured, his voice dropping an octave, his gaze dropping to my lips. "You forced me to listen to your terrible, sarcastic praises for an entire month." I swallowed hard, completely paralyzed. I was under duress. "Were you?" Caleb tilted his head, his face drifting agonizingly close. "Because I am starting to think you owe me, Foster. You completely ruined my life. You got me disinherited. You made me homeless." He paused, his breath warm against my cheek. "Are you going to take responsibility for the rest of my life or not?" My brain completely short-circuited. Yes. I didn't get to finish the sentence. Caleb leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a gentle, hesitant first kiss. It was desperate. It was a collision. It felt like 3 years of pent-up frustration, anger, hiding, and agonizing pining exploding all at once in a dark parking lot. My hands instinctively flew up, tangling into his damp hair, pulling him closer. His free hand slid down to my waist, gripping me tight, anchoring me to him, as if he were terrified I would evaporate into thin air. It was messy. It was breathless. It was absolutely perfect. When we finally pulled apart, both of us gasping for air, in the cold California night, Caleb rested his forehead against mine. He let out a shaky, quiet laugh. For the record, I whispered, my thumbs tracing the line of his jaw. User 892 was always my favorite follower. Caleb smiled, kissing the corner of my mouth. I know, Noah, I know. They say that when you survive a massive, life-altering disaster, the silence that follows is the loudest sound in the world. For the last 3 years, my life had been a chaotic, deafening symphony of academic anxiety, imposter syndrome, and a deeply unhealthy obsession with tearing down the golden boy of Ridgeview High. But this morning, the loudest sound in my life was the sputtering hiss of slightly burnt pancake batter. I sat cross-legged on a mismatched secondhand sofa, balancing my laptop on my knees. The morning sunlight was streaming through the single window of our tiny off-campus apartment. It wasn't much. The plumbing was questionable, the walls were paper-thin, and we were essentially surviving on my scholarship stipends and Caleb's wages from a local coffee shop. Yes, you heard that right. Caleb Sterling, former heir to a billion-dollar empire, currently worked 25 hours a week, making iced macchiatos for angry commuters, and I had never seen him look happier. Are you sure you do not want me to flip that? I called out, leaning over the armrest to peer into the cramped kitchenette. Caleb was standing by the stove, completely focused. He was wearing the same oversized gray Ridgeview hoodie I had given him the night he showed up at my dorm in the rain. It was frayed at the cuffs now, but he refused to throw it away. I have it entirely under control. Foster Caleb shot back, armed with a plastic spatula. He prodded the blackened edge of the pancake. It is not burnt. It is caramelized. It is a highly advanced culinary technique. You wouldn't understand. I laughed, a warm, quiet sound that still felt a little new to my chest. Right. Sorry, Chef Sterling. I turned my attention back to the glowing screen of my laptop. The tab was open, the Anti-Golden Boy Coalition. It had been 4 months since the National Science Expo, 4 months since Richard Sterling walked out of the gymnasium and out of Caleb's life. In all that time, I hadn't posted a single thing on the page. The followers were confused. The comment sections were full of wild conspiracy theories. Some thought I had been assassinated by the Sterling family. Others thought I had finally been expelled. It was time to put the ghost to rest. I clicked on the settings icon and navigated to the page name field. I highlighted the Anti-Golden Boy Coalition and hit the backspace key. The cursor blinked steadily on the blank line. I typed out the new name, Caleb Sterling's Private Club. Then I opened a new draft for a final post. I didn't want to write a long emotional essay. I didn't owe the internet our entire messy, chaotic love story. I just owed them an ending. I lifted my left hand, letting the morning light catch the cheap, simple silver ring sitting on my index finger. We had bought them at a boardwalk kiosk 3 weeks ago for $20 each. It wasn't a diamond, it wasn't gold, but to me, it was the most valuable thing in the world. I picked up my phone, angled the camera, and took a quick picture of my hand resting against the keyboard. I attached the photo to the post and typed a single line of text. The admin has officially retired. The Golden Boy is taken. I hovered my mouse over the publish button. For a fraction of a second, I thought about the terrified, bitter kid I was 3 years ago, sitting in a dorm room and hiding behind a digital mask because I was too afraid to be seen. I smiled, pressed publish, and then clicked log out for the very last time. Food is served, a voice announced right next to my ear. I jumped slightly. Caleb had walked over, setting a plate of highly questionable dark brown pancakes onto the small coffee table. He sat down next to me on the sofa, close enough that our shoulders pressed firmly together. He glanced at the laptop screen before I could close it. He saw the final post. He saw the photo of the ring. A slow, devastatingly genuine smile spread across his face. He reached out his hand, covering mine, his thumb lightly brushing against the silver band on my finger. So, Caleb murmured, his dark eyes locking onto mine, entirely stripped of the arrogant armor he used to wear. Does this mean I do not have to tip you $100 anymore just to get your attention? "I do not know," I teased, leaning into his warmth. "User 892 was my most loyal supporter. I am going to miss his money." "You have me," Caleb said softly. The sarcasm faded from his voice, leaving only a quiet, grounded certainty. "You have all of me, Noah, even the burnt pancakes." "Especially the burnt pancakes," I whispered. He leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, frantic collision in the parking lot 4 months ago. It was soft. It was slow. It was the kiss of two people who no longer had anything to prove and absolutely nothing left to hide. When we finally pulled away, resting our foreheads together in the quiet sunlight of our cheap apartment, I realized something. Life wasn't a teen movie. We didn't have a massive trust fund waiting for us. We still had to figure out college loans and part-time jobs and how to navigate a world that expected us to fail. We didn't have a perfect script. But as Caleb wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me tight against his chest, I knew we didn't need one. Because sometimes the best story of your life doesn't start with a flawless plan. Sometimes true love just starts with accidentally turning off a screen filter.